Hello, hello, my wonderful creatures of the multiverse. Oh dear. Oh, the scuff is starting already here. Hello, I'm Mysterious Origins. Ah, every time there's scuff, I get a little overwhelmed. Hello, I'm Miss of Mysterious Origins. I am a VTuber, your average zombie working for the Organization of Dimensional Research and Reconnaissance. And today, I am a writer. Or rather, I'm going to be illustrating a character from a novel I'm working on. This character is my character as the main character of the novel. The novel is called Fracture Point Epics of Fernanaz, specifically. We love Az. We love Az in this house. I'll explain more about Az as we start drawing, but yeah, let's jump in. I thought I heard my voice from the ether. Apparently I had my relay on for my aux. I am actually having trouble with my mic tonight, so if you guys hear any scuff, please let me know. Oy. It has been fun. I am actually going to turn my music down very low. Because I feel like I'm screaming over my mic and I shouldn't be. Or screaming over the music and I shouldn't be. So, for those of you who don't know, I am... For those of you that don't know, I went on a little bit of a hiatus recently. And I am finally back. Technically, my first stream back was yesterday, but we did an 18 plus stream, and I don't keep those on record just because. So, yeah, we're gonna be. This is technically the first stream that we're gonna have recorded and have a VOD of. My face tracking is just all over the place. I can see it. Oh my goodness. The scuff is real. I think I had scuff in one of my tags, but it didn't. Didn't stay. So, let's get into it. Let's draw. Let's do some funny things. First off, I'm gonna go into mechanical pencil. You can tell I was working on something else earlier because my sketch stuff is not set up. Oh, nope, that's the wrong one. It doesn't really matter, but I prefer the subcolor be blue. So, talking about Fracture Point, let's get into it. Fracture Point is a 3-part series that I'm working on. It's going to be broken up for a little bit. I'm actually going to get my navigator out because I do not actually have reference pictures for Az. Not reliable ones anyways, because I've been changing their design. What we're going to be doing tonight is we're going to be not only finalizing the design for Az, but making the little character description. As well. I like having little character description cards after we meet important characters. Something I like. Something I like other illustrated novels doing. And it's something I'd like to do as well. That way we can see and get to know who our main characters are. Like I mentioned, Az is the main character at Fracture Point. They are also, funnily enough, one of my favorite characters I've ever written. So let's actually talk about them instead of just vaguely alluding to them. Fracture Point is a fantasy series set into a world where 3 dimensions have crashed together and left only remnants in their wake. Beings called demigods work together to anchor the world together, but could only preserve small pocket dimensions called fractures. And this is the world we find Az in. Az is a little half goblin, half troll, who is going through some things, left their home fracture, and is doing mercenary work. Specifically, they are a hunter. Different roles have different meanings. Fracture Point. Fracture Point is kind of vaguely based off D&D, but with more freedom. I can hear... I knew I could hear my microphone just shaking around there. There we go, that should make it better. Fracture Point was actually originally going to be a webcomic, and then I decided I did not like the idea of doing it as a webcomic. What am I doing with their hands? I have made Az way too tall. Let's shorten this little gremlin out. I can worry about making this lanky little creature skinnier. How would I describe Az? I would describe Az as being uneducated, but not stupid. I'm currently writing the second chapter. By the way, I'm posting the chapters early on my Ko-fi account. If you guys want to see it, as like a monthly subscription, because I felt like it. I'm just blocking out a rough pose right now. I'm not worried about anatomy or anything, really. Like, I have a general idea of what I want the shape to be. Well, yeah, I'm gonna like thumbnail a few extra poses just because I don't know, something's not sitting right with this one. Yeah, if you've been hanging around my Blue Sky for a little bit, since before I came back streaming, you'll know that Fracture Point is kind of my baby right now. There have been pictures of Fern. Fern definitely has a much more solid design. And has had a solid design for a lot longer than Az has. Az kind of came as a sort of so the story behind Fracture Point and how Fracture Point as a whole came to be is I was looking at my character Fern one day. Is my face tracking? Yes, it looks like it's tracking. Okay. I was looking at my character Fern one day and I was like, you are not gonna settle with being a side character for completely for like another IP. You have main character energy. You need to be a main character. But then I started thinking, what if Fern's story has already been told? Like, who would find you? Why would they find you? And what would you be doing? The who would find you ended up being Az. By the way, Az is short for Azaba Erebus. Azaba, the name that Az was given by their mother. But because Az was Az, I'm going to give the tragic backstory and the spoilers here. So if you don't want them, this is probably not the stream for you. But it's not really spoils, just because Az talks about it pretty early in their own internal monologue. There's a lot of things that Az's mother just didn't do for them because she didn't think they were worth it. The pose I'm thinking of right now is more of a Fern pose than it is an Az pose, but I'm gonna draw it anyways just to see if I want to do that for like a composition. It's more just gonna be like a character card, but get all the ideas out of your head before you start on something. I'm really liking pose number 1, but you'll see what this pose is about later. If I decide, you know what, I actually think that's a better idea. Also, if we get through the main card, like if we get through the character card for Az, I'm going to be redoing that starting soon screen because I do not like it. It is very rushed. I had to get something down because I did not have a lot of time. Although the ending screen I have, I do love. Oh, hey! Dude is saluting. Yes and no. I am so sorry. I was not looking at chat. I'm so sorry. Did see you come in. More so, they are pulling back the hood. To reveal more of a face. I actually probably should pull up a reference picture of Az. No, that is for something completely different. Let me in. Did I put it in my downloads? I probably put it in my downloads. I did not. Where did it go? Where is the reference picture? There it is. There it is. There is my Az. I'm going to crop this. So that we only have as. Because we do not need Fern and we do not need Vulture right now. We only need the babiest of babies. Looks mischievous. Az is very mischievous. Unfortunately, in the first few chapters, we don't get to see that because Az is in business mode. But as soon as Az gets to settle down, we'll see the mischievous side come out. I do like this. I'm using this one. Helps if I turn back to my sketching pencil. This picture would actually take place a couple of... It'd probably be about 5 or 6 chapters past where I'm currently at with Fracture Point, but it would be about 20, 30 years into the story. Az is half goblin, half troll, but they take more after the goblin half. Az is from my own illustrated novel I'm working on called Fracture Point. Right now we're in chapter 2. I'm doing early releases over on my Ko-Fi. For those who support me, they can read the story as I'm writing it. Roughly once a month, I'll be posting. The last day of every month is the goal. Chapter 2 might be a little late because it's a little longer. Yeah. Originally, Fracture Point was going to be a webcomic. And then it kind of blossomed into... This is a lot. I am drawing your proportions. I am drawing as if they are very much thicker than they are. They are a twig at the very start of Fracture Point. This is as from the very first chapter. So right now, it is still in baby project mode. This is something I've only been working on for a couple months, so it hasn't found its community yet. But I have been posting things over on my Blue Sky, art pieces when I am able to. Updates are going to be... The pre-releases are going to be up for the chapters, that is, are going to be up in my Ko-Fi account for monthly supporters. Eventually, when I get to 5 chapters, I will be doing a prologue comic to do some promotional work. But until then, I am going to stream my babies and shove them into everybody's face. Because I love them. The sad part is, Az was never intended to be the original the main character for the story. The main character for Fracture Point was originally intended to be the other character that is going to be supporting Az, Fern, who, unlike our half-goblin protagonist, is a quote-unquote satyr. Showing baby all the time possible. Yes. Any excuse I have to draw these guys, I am drawing them and I am showing them off to the peoples. They are my lovely 30-year-old goblin and my crotchety old lady. I always refer to as a goblin. Az is only half goblin. They're half troll, which in Fracture Point is going to look a lot different than D&D trolls. Yeah, it is, because in Fracture Point, goblins only live to be 30 years. As has their mother's lifespan. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you view it. I view it as fortunately, because we would not have Az if I did not do that. I gotta draw in those ears. Those big helicopter ears. Helicopter wing ears. That hear everything. Az takes after their father mostly, the goblin portion. But just enough troll traits have leaked in to make Az a menace to anybody who's unfortunate enough to get on their bad side. How do you draw hands again? Some goblin was able to... Yep. Az's mother is very much... was like, oh, this goblin is very, very strong. We will have very strong babies. And then looked at Az and was like, what is this? This is very goblin. I don't like it. You know, completely bypassing the fact that he is half goblin. Trolls in Fracture Point are more like underground orcs, though. They very much adhere to a might equals right. I'm gonna drag that hood down a bit more. My sneaky baby. Unfortunately, Az's father did not ever get to see Az, so we don't get to interact with that portion of Az's life. And the other goblins are very terrified of Az because goblins are only 3 feet, and Az is 4'10", which is the average height of a troll. So they just see Az as this giant colossus. It's not fun for Az. But I feel like Az leans into it. Especially because trolls have very pointy mouths. Oh, that is the worst curl I've ever done. With shark-like teeth that are like bear traps. And goblins have flat teeth with tusks. You could become the king of goblins, but one thing that Az's mother did not think to teach Az was magic. And goblins are very proficient at magic, as are trolls. So they can easily run Az off by casting spells. My poor baby. I torture them greatly. Yeah. Az is... Oh, smacking my mic is not a good idea. Born to be a ruler, raised to be a loser. Yeah. Az is not in a good way when we meet them. But I keep on bringing up Fern for a very good reason. Fern kind of looks at Az and is like, okay, I can't leave you like this. You're kind of pathetic. I appreciate the effort. Come on. You're mine now. You're learning magic. Thing about Fern. The little brown character we saw in the bottom corner is Fern is a demigod. Specifically in Fracture Point, there are two types of demigods. There are the demigods that choose to serve a god, and the ones that are born to a god. Fern chose to serve a god. Chose being in quotation marks. Long story, we'll get into that in Fracture Point. It is spoilers. But Fern takes Az and teaches Az everything that their mother wouldn't. So don't worry too much. We'll have a... We will have a very powerful goblin. Very much Zero to Hero coded. If I could describe Az in a way that would make sense, if you watch Epic the Musical, Az is very much Telemachus coded if Telemachus was much more proactive in their own life. Telemachus was a lot more active in his own life. He and Az would definitely be very similar. I would think of Az's theme song as being legendary from Epic. Also, another fun fact about Az, these are little rings here are not actually irises. Trolls have floating little, I forget what they're called. I can look it up really quickly, I'm sure. Do-do-do. Bizarre story, yes. Looking Stone, that's what they're called. A bizarre story, yes. It's dangerous at times. I am not going to spoil. Fracture Point is kind of slice of life, but is also mixed in with Greek mythology and Greek gods. How fluffy are your bangs? Your bangs are relatively fluffy, aren't they? Yes, they are. Excuse you. I'm just throwing down a base sketch right now to... Fern is a demigod of Pan. So she is pretty much a demigod of all the forests, all the wilderness biomes. If it is considered wilderness, it is Fern's domain. But Fern is shown to have a much deeper connection to the Greek gods as the story progresses. What that connection is, I am not going to say. Because it, again, is spoilers. But as being taken on as Fern's apprentice gets to be front row and center as Fern deals with all of her, for lack of a better term, as Fern deals with all of this shit. It's our story actually starts off with as on the trail of a demigod by the name of the demigoddess Calypso, a title bestowed after something happened, and one of a group of demigods known as the Seven Executioners, Az is hired to hunt down this demigod and kill her. Az learns very quickly on that this is a bigger task than they were led to believe. Not just because the demigoddess Calypso is impossible to find, but because Az learns the stories of them. A lot of stories could be stopped by Zeus closing his room. Yes, indeed. Zeus is not the main antagonist of the story. He is not even a thought. It's a completely different Greek god causing mischief and mayhem. Actually, it's a multitude of different Greek gods, but specifically one. Are your boots over your pants? I think partially. I'm not going to spoil who it is, but technically the demigoddess Calypso has beef. By extension, Fern and Az have beef. Az is coming out a lot chunkier than I meant them to. But I can't help but being mad at it, because Az is supposed to have goblin and troll proportions. shorten up the legs, though. It feels like I dropped the hips. As is not Shakira, their hips definitely lie. Actually, the chunkiness doesn't come from the troll side. It actually is supposed to come from the goblin side. Goblins are very stocky. Trolls can be stocky, but with limited resources, they tend to be skinnier. Unless they are the ones that are taking those resources. Then they're huge. I wouldn't say they look too different from pop culture. It's just they're very portly creatures. The ancestry tree in Fracture Point is that trolls actually evolved from goblins after certain goblins ended up moving into cave systems. So their resources kind of got dwindled off. And they had to adapt to the cave dwelling environments. The ones that stayed out of the wilderness had plenty of resources. So they could just stay there in their fractures in their little pocket dimensions and eat their fill, and they didn't really have to fight. Trolls very much have to fight each other for their resources. And whoever the strongest troll is not only gets to lead the cave system, but gets to eat as much as they want, and the other trolls just have to feed off their scraps. Which is kind of hilarious in hindsight because they are also some of the strongest magic wielders in Fracture Point. They could very much just make things appear. They don't. They prefer to fight each other. Gonna go back into the face. I should explain that goblins, trolls, I do actually have the list here. With such origins as goblin, I would look tempted trolls. Yeah, a lot of people don't like trolls in Fracture Point. But unfortunately, the goblins are none too intelligent. Either. They don't have to look for resources, and that's kind of a good thing. So, the way it works in Fracture Point is that we have the fairies, the pixies, and the elves in one branch of the tree from Fae, and we have goblins, trolls, orcs, and gnomes are kind of the hybrids between goblins and elves. but they're in their own tree as well. But they all have Fey ancestry. And a lot of the other creatures have what's known as divine ancestry. All of these creatures, for one reason or another, are very skilled in magic. That doesn't include humanoid quote unquote humanoid creatures like animal hybrids, actual humans, dwarves. Dwarves are their own thing. That doesn't include any of them. One of the favorite creatures I have, it's not technically a new creature, but its design has been altered for Fracture Point so much, is actually the Capricorns. Much like trolls, they live in societies where might is very much right. But they are very much the daughter, where satyrs are the sons of Pan, the Capricorns are the daughters. They are hypercarnivorous, predatory animals that are just known for knocking boats out of the water and just being absolute menaces to sailors. I love them. And unfortunately, they are extinct by the time Fracture Point starts. And Pan is terrified to make new ones. Intentionally. For very good reasons that will be actually explained in Fracture Point. I don't remember the reason why I had goblins move into caves. I think it was certain fractures with caves, goblins just moved in and got stuck. Here's the worst part about Capricorns in Fracture Point. They're not like the depictions of Capricorns in Greek mythology or even in Babylonian cultures where goatfish are like 10 foot long. Lesser Capricorns are 15 to 30 feet long, known as river Capricorns. And sea Capricorns, or greater Capricorns, are 45 to 60 feet long. They are big ladies. And much like the sirens, they can speak and they have voices that can lure in sailors. Unfortunately, because they are actual sea monsters. In fact, most sea serpent legends in Fracture Point are actually just Capricorns just defending their territories and trying to get a meal. The whole point of them having despite the fact that they're extinct, I've been playing around with a storyline with as finding one of these guys. We'll see how it works. We'll see how story beats fall, because I may have to cut the storyline, but it will be very fun. The antagonist god, I'm gonna just say it, is actually the reason why the Capricorns went extinct. But they may have missed a few. And by a few, I mean the one they really should have been focusing on. Do Capricorns lay eggs? No, they're mammals. They're sort of like seals, if that makes sense. Think of them like seals. or whales. That sort of concept. Except immortal and very cranky. Dream of raising your own Capricorn. If you could find a baby Capricorn abandoned, they imprint like ducks. It's hard to find them abandoned because the mothers are very territorial. But that's a thought. Although, Scylla, the monster, does lay eggs. No reason why I bring that up. So yeah, I have plans for Pan and his little, if you'll use the turn of phrase, crotch goblins. One of the creatures that, as specifically, by the time Fracture Point starts, has issues with is satyrs. We're gonna sidestep Capricorns for a second and go into talking about their brothers. Whoever would tame a Capricorn would be the Pirate King of the Seas. Someone did it. Someone in Fracture Point's lore did it. She married him. And he overthrew his entire nation. With her help. Just how big of a lore is that? It'll be brought up. It'll be brought up very vaguely. It's not meant to be a secret, but it is something that is just vaguely touched upon by Fern, surprisingly, because she's the one with connections to Pan and all of his little delightful children. Why is your hand so big? Because I drew it that big, I know, but still, ew. I don't like that. Anything I share on stream is probably not going to be super... Either it's background lore or it's not really spoiler territories. And everybody can know it. I will also admit that the king that did that is a serpent folk. So there is a little bit of overlap because Capricorns are long, snake-like creatures. They are serpentine in nature. Other sea monsters, most of them are the sea monsters from Greek mythology. So we have, I almost can never say her name, Garbadus. We have Scylla. Scylla's not really a sea monster, but she can be found in seas if she's looking for sustenance. The sea outside her lair is not particularly safe. But she doesn't really go out of her way to harm people. Sirens are a thing. Sirens are a big thing. And you have multiple types. You have your traditional Persephone's handmaidens that were cursed by Demeter. They're known as the sky sirens. You have the sea sirens, which are their descendants that are partially mermaids. They're not quite there yet. You kind of have Selkies off to the side, occupying their own niche. They're not technically violent towards sailors, but if they're cheesed off enough, they will knock boats over. You do have sea dragons to worry about, depending on which fracture you go into. If you go into a fracture with dragons, there is a chance you're going to find a sea dragon just skulking about. Just stay away from dragons in general. They're big, they're old, they're powerful. Nymphs, different types of nymphs in general in Fracture Point are just, again, they're hyper predators. They don't attack people often because they don't actually need sustenance. But when they do eat, it's going to be flesh. They can't digest fruits and berries very well. If you have Oceanid in the water, stay away from it, because she might drown you just for fun. Yeah, very fun times. Sounds like being a sailor is not a very good career choice. If you're not in the cities, just not being in the cities in general is not a very good choice. Unless you're like very skilled, like the Heroes Guild or the Adventurers Guild. Mercenaries will get sent for dirtier tasks, things that the heroes and adventurers are too scared to do, or just they don't want to get their hands icky. But if you're a hero, an adventurer, a mercenary, or really anybody that travels outside of their home base, you got a 50-50 shot. Just know what fractures are safe, what fractures aren't, and what fractures are inhabited. There are actually multiple types of fractures. There are 4 types of fractures, and I can actually pull up their names here for a second. So the first type of fracture are the wilds. If they have any settlements, they're very small, they're very primitive, quote unquote. Most people that live there, they live off natural resources, and whatever creatures are in there, you're at the mercy of. People tend to stay away from the wilds, and that's where you're going to find most monsters. Nymphs, angels. Angels are a relative of the nymph, and they're a relative of the fae. Again, angels are technically hyper predators, but they don't require sustenance, so if you leave them alone, they will leave you alone. Nymphs are actually pretty terrifying in the fractures as well. I'll pull up a picture of them in a few minutes. You have your messes, which is the modern era, pretty much human settlements, mostly. They're modern day cities. They have electricity, all the amenities we would have, or they're in the industrial era. There are no monsters in this. There are no creatures other than cows, humans, chickens, typical farm animals. This can also include a couple of medieval eras. And then we have the blanks. Blank fractures have nothing in them. Like nothing. There's literally almost no wildlife. There's nothing but grass, maybe a couple of bushes, meadows, maybe a sea with no fish. They're blank. Merchants will often set up shop there because there's no threat, and people coming through the fractures will pay a hefty amount just to stay the night before they have to go to their next fracture. And finally, we have the Sleeks, which is futuristic era robots, metals. The Sleeks are very prejudiced to organic life and oftentimes have no plants or animals at all. And they are incredibly hard for living creatures. So if you go in there, you have to have a breathing apparatus or have to have a spell that breathes air into your lungs all the time. So the thing with blanks is they're not always blank because there are two reasons why blank fractures can't have creatures. One is because the fractures are separated by portals, and to get from one fracture to another, you have to exit a portal into a place called the Void and float as if you're in space. The Void isn't necessarily a vacuum, but it is very much not a lot of air can get through the portals, so there isn't a lot of air for you to breathe. And unfortunately, fractures do have walls that separate them, so you can't just... Unless there is a connecting fracture, these little pocket dimensions are self-contained. So centaurs are restricted to the wilds. Wilds do have meadows and all that. It's not as expansive as a blank fracture would be. And centaurs themselves won't leave their fractures because their body weight is just not an easy... Horsey bodies are not very easy to float through space, through limbo. Az may not know magic, but Az kind of stole their entire outfit from somebody before they left their own fracture. Like the fractures were created when 3 dimensions just crashed together, and the demigods from those 3 dimensions just anchored the fragmented remains together, so that the people inside those fragmented remains of these 3 dimensions would not die. The blanks are a combination of all 3 dimensions that just... the life has been wiped out of them. Messes are their own dimension. The Sleeks are their part of the dimensions. And the Wilds are their own dimension as well. They're all the fragments of different dimensions that have fallen. There is a very high death count that is accumulated because of this event. Az kind of stole their outfit. It is not the typical troll outfit. Someone attempted to try and capture a troll as their familiar, and Az just kind of stole everything off the corpse. With it, a breathing device that looks like a rebreather. Or like a combination of a rebreather and a gas mask that supplies them with air. I'm actually going to be drawing that next. That reminds me, I need to draw that. What it actually does is it siphons air from... Yeah. The wild medieval to modern era and the futuristic ones are all their own different dimensions that have been fractured apart. The very second chapter has a reference to what one of those dimensions is, and if anybody gets it, I will be very happy. But I'm realizing more and more that it's a lot more niche than I thought it was. There are so many characters that I would like to talk about that I can't, though, because their stories are just spoilers. Especially their relationship to Az. Gonna draw in their little bag that they got from the innkeep, which is where my thought process on that went. Oh my goodness. Az is very much the bane of that innkeep's existence. Imagine you see a 20-year-old goblin, or rather, what you think is a very large 3-year-old goblin, stumbling into your bar, have them slam their hand on your bar, and tell you, "I'm 20 years old, give me a drink." Apple boy. He did not have a very good time. Nor did the adventuring party that Az, the mercenary party that Az kind of sauntered up to and was like, "Hey, hire me." I actually do want to explain something. The reason why Greek gods are the main pantheon in this world is because out of all the gods that were competing, a majority of the demigods that saved the fractures were Greek. They were worshipping and helping serve the Greek gods. So they ended up establishing the temples first and ended up pushing out the other gods. So the other gods don't have access to this world anymore. I'm not liking that foot. That foot is irritating me. Yeah, there was a big kerfuffle at the beginning of this. Unfortunately, even the demigods that helped are starting to forget the old worlds that they came from. And there are demigods that have lived to see the modern era of the Fraction Point, even though the battle was 10,000 years ago. But they're starting to forget the world that they came from and are just absorbing into the new world, let's say. Their storylines are changing to how Fracture Point is set up. It becomes a bit of a storyline. But I don't know how deep in depth I'm going to go. I know one character specifically is going to directly acknowledge it. Everything else is kind of up in the air. 3 of these demigods are actually a part of the 7 executioners. One of these demigods is actually the demigoddess Calypso that it was previously mentioned. Well, thank you. I like talking about my babies. And I like talking about this project because it has just grabbed my head and given me all of the brainworms. I promise you, I have not touched 1% of the lore I have written down already. And there is more coming. Would you like some of these brainworms to work on another project of yours? I have enough. I can share. I'm also not giving spoilers because my brain is very easily jumping from one topic to another. Because I have so many pieces that I want to throw into the void. The fact that this is not colored in is very much giving me anxiety. Oh, so I don't think this... It might get mentioned by Fern, but Az's color palette right now is very off-putting because Az is not seen enough sunlight. I do actually want to get into the Demigoddess Calypso because that is a very fun little thing. Or at least the lore I want to drop about her. The 7 executioners. 3 of them are from the beginning of the fractures. Okay, I am going to say this. I offer the brainworms, but I do not offer working on someone else's project because I am too much of a control freak for that. I will warn. If I have an idea, I want to run with it until I have worn it out. And that is the only warning I give people. Does that look good? That looks good. The Demigoddess Calypso. An ancient monster that has been in the fractures since the dawn of time. None know how old she is, but all know how powerful. She is one of the only demigods that has actually destroyed a fracture from the inside out and left only fragments of it. Most of the executioners themselves have only turned mess or sleek fractures into blanks. When Az gets hired to try and hunt down this dangerous beast, Az realize they're not being told everything. Only to realize they've bitten off much more than they can chew. I'm gonna be honest, though. I don't know how people are gonna react when they find the demigoddess Calypso in story. Some people are going to be very excited. I know some people are going to be mad at me. You know what? If Fracture Point ever gets large enough, I will do an audiobook version of it. Because I think that would be fun. I eventually kind of want to do an animation. If I can't do it at Fracture Point specifically, I want to do it a Fracture Point sequel. Oh my goodness, I'm starting to lose my voice. Sequel, The Tales of Captain Vulture, or the final story in Fracture Point's world, Bloodfay. Bloodfay is going to be very different than Fracture Point and the Tales of Captain Vulture, which are sort of adventure stories. Tales of Captain Vultures is definitely solidly an adventure story. Fracture Point is equal parts adventure story to slice of life. Sort of like, I think Dungeons and Meshi would probably be the best example. But, you know. I guess it helps if I turn my line art. There is a character I can talk about because they are definitely not going to be in Fracture Point. I threw them into Fracture Point's world, and unfortunately, although they'll be mentioned in brief instances, the storyline they were going to be a part of no longer fits in Fracture Point. And that is Miki Maki the All-Consumer. One of the other executioner, and a good way to base the demigoddess Calypso's power off of, is Miki Maki the All-Consumer. She is an ancient tabaxi. Tabaxi in this case just being all cat hybrids. They've all just been sort of clumped together in tabaxi because I did not want to do multiple lores for multiple different cat people. That's entirely just a me thing. Although Nagas and Serpent Folk are two different things. But in this case, she is a Smilodon tabaxi who has lived through the shattering of the 3 dimensions and sort of helped save the Fracture Point. She sort of did. She had a prediction about what to do and then kind of disappeared and didn't bother to help. That counts, right? But as soon as the Fracture Point had settled and all of the civilizations had started cropping up, she decided she wanted to have some fun. She started in the fracture where she had set up her shop. And then commenced to consume all of the other tabaxis that had showed up. To put it politely. Then she went over to a fracture connected to the Feywilds and continued to consume. She kept this up for a couple thousand years, all the while draining the beings of their magic as she consumed them. To the point where she began shattering fractures just because she could. Trying to get Az's little shark teeth correct. Of course, my pen tablet is acting up again. Eventually, she stopped, though. But then stories of her cropping up in dimensions and slowly giving people power and status in exchange for their servitude. People started noticing that lords and ladies, people who were trying to keep the power the same, started disappearing. She would always start helping those in poverty, and the strongest in the fracture, those who would speak out against those impoverished gaining power, would be the first to leave. Slowly, there would be nothing left except for those impoverished that had been given power. But soon, they and all their resources would disappear as well. None would know what happened to them until the bones would show up and the resources spent in a new fracture. I will say Mikimaki the All-Consumer does not aid anybody if she does not have to. She very much is greed and bloodlust personified. I say that gently. If you see her and you did not seek her out, run. And if you did seek her out, mercy upon you, fellow traveler. She was originally going to be a villain in the story, but I couldn't find a way to make her fit that didn't feel very shoehorned. Which is unfortunate, but we do adore her. I do adore my chaotic evil. My chaotic evil little villain. She still runs around the fractures, but she's definitely not going to be as big of a threat. there is no big secret to what Mikimaki is. The biggest secret being what happened to her once she stopped appearing in Fractures. But even then, it's very obvious if you know where to look, which... Hint, there was nothing left for her to take. This is the part where we reset display and start flipping. Wanted to ask what's going on with all those random pauses mid-sentences. It might be a combination of things. It could be just my brain buffering, and it could be my mic is cutting out. Let me check. I am sorry for the tapping on the mic that's about to happen. I'm just checking to make sure my mic isn't cutting in and out. No, it's not cutting out. So yeah, that might have just been me pausing to let my brain buffer. Oh wait, maybe I check my bitrate. No, it's working. Like a computer. Yeah, I have way too many tabs open. My brain has way too many tabs open, and I don't know which one is playing the music. But if I could turn it off, I would. Oh my goodness. The music is, not the computer. There's a reason why I have lo-fi playing in the background. I think the fact... When I changed villains, the storyline with Mikimaki was going to be a bigger thing until I changed villains. And I'm gonna say this, I kind of changed villains on a whim. Because I had an idea. And then my brain went, well, what if we did this? Well, what if we did this? This doesn't work. Well, what if we did this? And then I started playing around with the Greek gods and their pantheons. Like I said, it's all the worms. All the worms are having a party. All the brain worms are having a little party in my head. If anybody would like them, they can go have a party with someone else. Okay, I do actually have to say this. Something that just popped into my head, because I mentioned the innkeep earlier. And I have beef with the starfish face. Because their character, Leon, almost looked... I made my character the innkeep. I'm not going to say their actual name yet, because that is spoilers. It is very big spoilers. But I made the innkeep. And I plopped them down, and I plopped them in my sketchbook. And I didn't think about them for a couple months. Then the starfish face posted their whole thing with their character, Leon. And I went back to my sketchbook the very next day and realized, oh my goodness, these are the same character. They look exactly the same, and they practically fill the same role. And I was very upset about it. Like, all the love to the starfish face. It was just a moment of great minds think alike. But oh my goodness, I had to change the design of the innkeep. And I was so mad about it. All because I didn't post it first. I was... What are the odds? I don't know the odds, but it's not... Oh my goodness. I like the new design. I swear to you, though, the only difference between Leon and the innkeep was that Leon had pointy ears, and I was just sitting there like, oh no. I am so depresso espresso now. I cannot use this design. And I'm gonna make this clear for those who are gonna take it out of context. I don't have actual beef. I don't. But it was just a funny thing. Because how dare one of my favorite YouTubers make a character that's exactly the same as mine before I can post mine. I'll do his little character card when he becomes more relevant again. He kind of pops in for the first chapter and doesn't become relevant again until like the 5th or 6th. It'll depend on how I write the 3rd chapter, honestly. There is some very dark stuff that happens in the 3rd chapter. Fracture Point is not an innocent story either by any means. It is very much a mature story. There is a lot of dark themes in Fracture Point. I was liking that little hair piece, but I don't like it anymore. Go back and be a hair tuck. I still stand by the fact that Fraction Point is a slice of life story. To a certain extent, of course. But... Sorry, I'm like zooming in and out a lot. Fracture Point, I do want to touch on some dark themes. Blood is sipping through all the rivers. Oh, there will be blood. There will be blood. I've already alluded to one of the themes. I'm going to cut it from Fracture Point specifically. It may get touched on in Blood Fae. Blood Fae itself has a very dark premise. A fairy gets cursed by someone. We don't know who, because the way that the fairy got cursed wiped that person from existence. And she and her favorite vampire have to go and find a way to break the curse. That is Blood Fae. I like my dark stories, can you tell? More specifically, I like my cozy stories with very dark undercurrents and very dark themes. Fern's story as a whole is very dark. I have alluded to it throughout the stream, but yeah, no. The way she became a demigod is not a very delicate tale. It is very in your face. But you'll have to read about it when it comes out. I will just say there is a reason why Fern acts the way she does. I call her my cranky old woman for a very good reason. Not just because, even though she's physically 22, she acts very much like an old lady complaining about joint pain. Blood Fae and vampire together. So yeah, that's probably be a big, they have a very good topic. I haven't really thought too hard and deep on Blood Fae yet. I know the general premise of it, but all of the finer details are still in the back of my burner for right now. I'll have more to talk about when I can, at least tell the names of these characters. They are very much on the back burner. I have a general idea of what they look like. I don't have names for them yet. We're just gonna smile and wave, boys. Smile and wave. Oh my goodness, I have to do this in one line and I'm not happy about it. We did it. We did it, folks. Like I said, Blood Fae will be the third rendition into the Fracture Point series. The first story is The Epics of Fernanaz, which is the establishing story for the most part, where we get to learn all about the fractures, all the rules of the game. We'll kind of tread and rehash with Tales of Vulture. Tales of Captain Vulture will actually start halfway through the Epics of Fernanaz. Because reasons. Totally doesn't have to do with something Az says to Vulture that I'm not going to talk about. Totally doesn't. Not at all. Why would you think that? Az totally doesn't just tell a pirate queen. Lore redacted. For no reason. It will be a very funny scene, and I am sitting on the edge of my seat, ready for that scene to happen. I need to start flipping the canvas to see how this looks. Yeah, no. So, Tales of Captain Vulture happens halfway through Fracture Point, and Blood Fae happens 1,000 years after the end of Captain Vulture. How many pages of lore have I already wrote? Keep in mind, these are all jot notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 14, plus 11. That's 25 right there. Plus 8, 33. 37. 41. 43. 45. 54 pages of jot notes with a couple of pictures sprinkled in, just for good measure. There's a reason I had to split this into 3 stories. There was a lot I could have done. I will say Zeus does not actually appear in any of the stories as a villain. Nor do any of the... Okay, Poseidon shows up for a little bit. Poseidon shows up for a little bit in the tales of Captain Vulture, but not as an antagonist, more so as a, hi, I'm here. I exist still. 54 pages of just notes. It's going to be a long story. The goal is probably... The chapters are relatively short by standard novel practices, but the goal is roughly 54 chapters. I kind of don't write chapters based on page amounts. I write them by, this is what I want. How does it flow properly so that until it's done and we get to the end point of the chapter? Which I know will infuriate most standard novel readers, but it's my story. I'll write how I want to. You need to chunk out your arm. There's a reason why I called it the Epics of Fernanaz. They will be epic and long. We will have a lot of time with the cranky goat lady. And her kid, the Goblin. There's not really any hiding it. As is going to become Fern's kid. If anybody doesn't get that from the 3rd chapter on, I will be very, very surprised, especially people that don't watch the streams and don't see this part of the world building, the behind the scenes, where I'm explicitly stating it. The people that are just reading it straight, I will be very surprised if they don't realize it very quickly that Fern is just going to yoink as. That's why that looks wrong, because that's not how the cloak would flow. I couldn't figure out why that didn't look right. I was so focused on making sure you could see everything that I wasn't paying attention to how that would actually look. This is what I mean by my... Sometimes you just get so into what you're doing, you don't realize the mistakes. Hypothetically, if your work gets a big fan base, would you be able to keep your ideas? Or would you be slightly influenced by what the fans want? Hypothetically, if I had a bigger fan base, I think I would be able to keep my works pretty much my own. But, and this is one of the joys of having a big, expansive world, I would be able to encourage my fan base to do their own creations in the world and have it all be canon. Or at least most of it. Things that don't interfere with the stories that I want to tell. I think I would take a more, like, movie studio approach at it, where I wouldn't interact with the fan, like, the fan creations, outside of, like, fan art. So fan fiction, fan AUs, and the like. I would kind of just ignore them and put them aside until the series would be done, so that I don't get influenced. And also so nobody would say, hey, this is way too close to my idea. I would love it if people engaged in a way that made them happiest. I know Fern's backstory is going to break a lot of people, and there are going to be a lot of AUs where she does not go through that backstory, but I hate to tell them, if she doesn't go through her tragic backstory, she becomes a completely different person. And you definitely don't like the person she's going to become. There are, like, bits and pieces of who she would have been and who she is now. But only under very specific circumstances. I guess it depends on how much you would like. People might like her, but I don't, especially because of how she gets described by another character when we find out her backstory. A lot of people are probably going to misinterpret how she behaves. I already know that. When it comes to what the fans want, I do think a lot of fans will most likely want to take more of the tragic elements out. They will probably want me to stop bullying my characters. Because I put my Blorbos through a lot. Why do authors like to their characters' tragic backstories and make them suffer? We like our Blorbos to have depth, but we sometimes don't always have reasons to give them depth and reasons for their actions. So, with Fern being the champion of Pan, I'm going to actually put this piece out there because it's not going to be a secret. Champions are a very specific type of demigod. They work in a very specific way. I'm not going to get into that right now, just because it takes away from the point, and I'm going to go on a tangent. But Fern's tragic backstory is why she actually becomes violent. I'm just going to say violent. Fern has moments where if she, with Pan, if you actually look into his domains, he's a lesser god of retaliation, not retribution, retaliation. Specifically, he's the retaliation of, you did me wrong on my account, so I'm going to hit you back as hard as I can. We see this specifically in the story with Echo. He hits back way too hard with Echo, simply because she said no. He felt slighted. He hit her as hard as he could. Not physically, but also, yes, physically. And so, by extension, Fern acts in retaliation. You wronged me, so now I'm going to hit you and wrong you as hard as I can. She doesn't use that as an excuse to harm people. In fact, she takes accountability. I should have my powers under control. I should not let him take over like that. But it still happens. It's a reason. Revenge is always nice. Warranted revenge is always nice. But attacking innocent civilians over perceived slights, probably not the best thing. I don't want to draw the circle. I am sorry. I don't want to draw it. It is going to give me anxieties. The not so fun part about Fern is a lot of her story actually happens before we even meet her. She's gone through the character growth. Demigods are the way that demigods, specifically demigods capital D, capital G, which are the ones that serve the god or aid them. Again, there's a difference. They are either possessed by their god to do as the god is told, or they are forced to do tasks in the god's name, or they'll not only be stripped of their power, but killed. They're more like servants that choose to be under the most part. There are exceptions to the rule. But yeah, no. Reasons, not excuses. To the tragic backstories bit. The unfortunate thing with Fern is there is no actual way to control her powers. She can use them how she pleases, but when it comes to for the most part, but when it comes to retaliation, there is no way to control her powers because she's not the one using them. She perceives a slight, and so Pan forces her to get rid of that slight. Not very fun for poor Fern. Fern did learn how to kind of deal with it. Her being a champion also gives her a lot more leniency. There is something else that gives Fern a little bit more leniency in how she acts towards her patron god. But, you know, fun lore bits that I get to keep to myself for now. I do have a couple of surprises. Short, never mess with her because that's what real retaliation is. Exactly. Anybody who watches the stream and then goes to my coffee to do the supporter pledge and get the chapters. For chapter 2 specifically, they're going to have some realizations. Probably the same realizations that Az has. Chapter 2 is not coming out till next month. This month is chapter 1. That'll be out on the 31st. I think the little promo chapter I did is already off. I may repost it because Coffee doesn't let you hold on to things for more than 30 days. Or if they do, I do not know how to access that piece. I can't actually wait until I start teaching Az how to do magic. That's gonna be fun. Az will learn magic, don't worry. Fern's not gonna let her kid stay behind. I was debating on whether I wanted to make that glass or if I wanted to make it metal. I think I'm gonna make it metal just because that is not a piece. That needs to go bye-byes. That does not. You stay. Fellow artists, do not let people shame you for using the tools in your drawing program. They are a great way to learn. I'm not going really super detailed on the rebreather. I'm just calling it a rebreather because it makes sense. It looks like one. I should probably mention, Az shortened down is just AZ. Az. The first spell that all people learn, if they learn magic correctly, is the summoning spell. Don't get too excited, that's not as impressive as it sounds. The summoning spell, usually it's taught. I'm actually going to open up a little thingamaboober here so I can actually explain it. Because fracture points magic system greatly pleases me, and I am very proud of this. It's not perfectly circle, but imagine it is. That these are all perfectly circled one another. Fracture Point's magic system is your 3 base elements, your secondary elements that make you, if you master these 3 elements, you become a mage. The next 3 elements can either become sage or sorcerer, and the final 3. The first spells most people learn are earth magic, because it is the sturdiest and it is the most stable to jump off from. The summoning spell is the most basic earth magic, because the first thing you learn to summon is a pebble. You learn how to summon and how to move earth. You don't really learn how to create anything yet. You just learn how to take from place, move from place, put it down in place. Then you move on to wind magic. Propulsion, sort of making air move from below, making pockets of air, making air vacuums, sort of shifting around. We jump off from there. And then water magic. It's not as sturdy as earth magic, but not as free-flowing as wind magic. And it's very, very temperamental and tricky to learn because it's more triggered from emotions. Your emotional state has a bigger effect on water magic than it will on earth or wind magic. Summoning supply of pebbles and a supply of ammo you can throw at someone. Or you can do what most people do when they're learning earth magic. They summon a bunch of pebbles and then use propulsion from the wind magic to just shoot them off like a machine gun. That is a favorite of Fern's from when she was first learning magic, and she teaches that to Az, and it is very cute and it is very funny. The next 3 are fire, light, and dark. Most people will learn fire first because fire is very similar to water magic. It's just a very different emotional core. If you're upset with somebody, don't cast fire magic because you will burn everything to the ground. But if you're not feeling anything at all, you're probably not going to spark a flame. And then you can jump off either dark or light, depending on what your internal disposition is. The irony is, if you're a gentler disposition, you should learn dark magic first. Because dark magic is needs a very nice emotional core, a very calm emotional core. It is very cool, it's very collected. But if you're out of control with your emotions and you're a much more vibrant personality, you should learn the light. It is radiant. Light and dark magic don't actually do what people would expect them is, but there is a bit of a spoiler there, so I'm gonna not really explain that much. Cute. Yeah, sure, for the first magic, and it turns into a machine gun. There is a lot of earth magic that Az will have to learn before she can learn wind magic. I'm going to also state this because I'm going to do this probably a lot more for the rest of the stream. Az has any pronouns. He, she, they, them. Az will even go by it. They are very gender fluid. They are very fluid. There is story reasons why. And it will actually affect how they use magic. So it's actually a very good time to bring that up. But yeah, no. The last 6, don't worry about them right now. It is not important. They are very more specialized magic. I will say that necromancy is one of these 3. Or one of these 3 out on top, I believe. I think that's how I set it up. It does something very different than what you expect. Oh no, it's one of these 3 in the inner circle. Necromancy is going to be a fun one to explain in the actual story. Sorry, drinking some Sprite because I need to nourish my throat. I'm going to save this quickly. Chapter 1, there is a very fun scene. Not chapter 1, the prologue little chapter that I did. The promotional chapter. There is a very fun scene that I am very sad a lot of people probably missed. Because it will not be in the actual story. Because it was more of a proof of concept than anything. So magic in Fracture Point, very specifically, is the element of change. So whatever change you're feeling, whatever change is internal will affect how you do magic. So it's not just emotions, it's gender identity, it's things like if you get transfigured into a different species, which can happen, that will change how your magic is affected. Say a human was turned into a fae for some reason. Say they were a water and light mage. There is a specific name for that. I have to pull it up though. Where did I put it? Magic system. There it is. So, say they are a sky mage as well. Oh, no. Sea mage, sorry. Light and water is a sea mage. Well, you got turned into a fae, so now you're a forest mage. You specialize in earth magic. In fact, the entire fae line specifically specialize in forest magic. The combination of earth magic and dark magic. Sky mages are light and wind. Sun mages are fire and dark, surprisingly, because the sun casts shadows. In that case, the most powerful sorcerers are fluid. Yes. Unfortunately, a lot of the most powerful sorcerers that are in Fracture Point are also changelings, so they don't really have forms to begin with. They just have their sort of half fae form, and then whatever else is in there, but that's not even their true form. Their true form just exists nebulously, and they are almost never in it. I did promise I would pop up a picture of these little, for lack of a better term, these little shits. I don't think I have a picture of Faye right now. Because I never... But I do have the pictures of nymphs. Copy. We are going to reset this, because this is going to be fun. Control... It's not going to let me. Okay. Download. File. Port. Image. Downloads. Oops. You are not going to turn properly. Welcome to the wonderful world of nymphs. One of the most powerful magic users, by extension of being related to the Fae. They don't look dangerous until they open up their mouths. Which are lined with razor-sharp teeth going down either side. These are far too chunky. Think hypodermic needles going down each side in a layer of 2 that opens up like a Venus flytrap and snaps down. Their faces open up into giant mouths. These are not actually eyes. These are eye markings on their face. If you get up close, the uncanny valley very much kicks in. Angels are pretty much the same thing, except they do have eyes. In fact, a very funny scene that I don't know if I'm going to put in, that I had in my head, of a character interaction is Az wakes up to what they think is a nymph on their bed. The nymphs don't bother them. Because Fern's pretty cool with the nymphs. And then the nymph spreads their wings and blinks at Az. I should also mention that angels are about twice as strong as nymphs. Because unlike nymphs that are tied to gods, angels very well are not. They are not connected to anything. They are not truly connected to the Christian God either in this universe. They kind of just exist to eat demons. The closest lookalikes to nymphs are archangels, which are your standard angels that you would see, but there are also the seraphims, that giant 20-foot hulking beasts with 3 faces and 6 wings and a multitude of eyes in their human form, but can also turn into giant 30-foot serpents lined with eyes. I forget the name of the wheel angels, but they exist too. They're not seraphims. I've heard somebody call them seraphims before. Only to be met with that horrendous jump scare. Yeah, a lot of travelers that have lost their lives to nymphs that has been their entire experience. I do believe in lore, Echo is the only nymph that doesn't do this. Not because she can't, but simply because lore reasons I can't explain. She has a giant hole in the side of her face. So she doesn't like to lose food, and it's much harder for her to eat. the lore isn't that she's got the hole in her face. Actually, I can probably just say this. Yeah, Fern's putting her back together. Fern, that's why she's so nice with the nymphs. They see her looking after their own, and they're like, oh, you're cool. I don't actually think that's a spoiler. No, that's not a spoiler. Fern just kind of exists with the magical creatures. She doesn't really mess with them, they don't mess with her. She respects them, they respect her. For the most part. There are a couple that don't. But that's how nymphs, fae, and angels all hunt, is they hunt on the uncanny valley. They trick you into thinking they're human until you get close enough to munch on. The only difference is the fae also have to do the law of equivalence, where they... I don't think I'm actually going to touch on fae and fracture points specifically, but it is good to hammer them out as well. Because originally they had a much bigger plot, because I didn't have a lot of to go off of. Randy Fern getting sympathy of nymphs. Yes, she is. Specifically, the sirens as well. Fern also looks after the sirens. Simply because... That actually is spoilers. I actually can't say that. Okay. Caught myself there. But yeah, no. I don't think I have a picture of Fern up yet. And Pullet, I do have a picture of... actual... That's a background image of Fern. There she is. There she is at 18. Not at physically 18. She's a couple thousand years at this point. Fern normally has very normal sclera. I will say that for... But our satyr is currently in retaliation mode. Also, she doesn't dress like this in the modern era. She has the dress, she doesn't wear it. I think the lore of that picture was that either that was the week she got married, or that was week before she got married. No, that would be the week she got married, because she has her little marriage earring thing. Her just using Pan's power to summon giant plants to... Those are plants, I promise. To whack people with. I love that picture of Fern. That's actually going to be a button when I go to do cons of my ask about my OCs section. Sorry, had to sneeze. Thank you. Like I said, Fern had main character energy when she popped in my brain. She started off as a freaking Sonic OC of all things. And then she was like, nope, I don't want to be this anymore. Well, what do you want to be? I don't know. What do you want to be? I don't know. Old woman? What would you like to be? You are currently a villain. Villain being in air quotes. What would you like to be? I don't know. She was originally supposed to be half Moby and half human. Hence the goat legs. But I heard talking and I wasn't sure what that was. It's static from my music. Okay. Fern very much does. I mean, I guess you have to marry a Titanoboa serpent folk. This is not spoilers, so I can also tell this part. Yeah, not only did she marry a Titanoboa serpent folk, she married this Titanoboa serpent folk, knowing that A, he was a dwarf, so his family was about 10 times the size that he was. Him being the average length of a normal Titanoboa. All serpent folk in this world are about 10 times the size of their IRL snake counterpart. So he's 60 foot. But he is also the champion of Nemesis. With the demigods of Nemesis specifically being the ones that carry out justice and get rid of demigods that commit blasphemy against their patron gods. Something that Fern walks the line on and knows she does and still does. This woman is the bane of my existence. But she is also one of my favorite characters because I love my gremlin characters. I once described Fern as having the attitude of... I don't know why, Sophia Petrillo from Golden Girls popped into mind. But yeah, an 80-year-old Italian grandmother who has seen war. That is how I describe this gremlin of a character. Oh, I just realized my camera just randomly stopped tracking my face. Bear with me a moment while I go turn that back on. Okay, we're back. Fern is definitely one of my favorite characters ever. Simply because she has the attitude and she doesn't just talk a big game, she can back it up. Is Az's portrait done? I think they're still a little too thick, so I'm just... You... Some free transform. Perfect. do some cleanup on the liner, and then we can put some colors down. I'm looking at the time and we probably won't have time to do any of the other fun stuff I had planned tonight, but that's okay. Here we go. Sorry my screen is jumping all over the place. I very much prescribe to zooming in and zooming out method. Right? I forgot the little bibs and bobs on your neck. You know what? We're just gonna shuffle it down to 1. It's not a bad idea. Clean up these little lines over here. Reset display. Go. Thank you for popping in. Thank you for being here. Jeezery. Love, thank you for the support. Thank you for letting me ramble about my little babies all throughout the stream. And all of their lore. Thank you for the follow. I am still going to ramble about my children. I probably have way too many layers at this point. But, you know what? We ball. Fuck it, we ball. I am probably gonna start adding the language tab to my streams because I am starting to notice that I am cursing more often. And I apologize for those of you who do not like that, but I can't really help it. It's slipping into my normal dialect. Let's see. That is a nice gum color. We're going to use that. Oh yeah, they're the same color as his hair. I mentioned before on stream, or maybe it wasn't on stream, but it was at some point, I am not too big of a fan of Az's all teal color palette. I guess it helps if it helps a lot. I forget what I was gonna say. Oh my goodness. I'm not the biggest fan of their all teal color palette because I don't feel like there is an accent color. The accent color was supposed to be their skin, but Things happen. Okay, you two are going bye-byes for now. Because I did not need to get jump scared by my own nymphs. Mayhaps. Mayhaps, mayhaps. I just realized that happened. Bear with me a moment. We get to watch me try and... I wasn't looking, and then I perfectly connect them. What are the odds? Well, not perfectly, but as perfectly as I can. Here we go. Yeah. What in the world? Oh, there's the problem right there. This is why I always go over my lines, usually. I'm sorry, it's going to get very jumpy as I try to figure things out. I feel like I dropped a lot of lore earlier, and I realize it is going to be very hard for a lot of people to keep up with that. But like I said, would anybody like the brainworms? Please, take them. I do not need them. They are hogging up space in my inventory. Please. These characters are... I love them to pieces. This is not a part of Az's normal wardrobe. I completely forgot to draw in the rope for the rebreather, but you know what? Oh, excuse me. We're keeping it. Now we get to go in and make sure I didn't miss anything. Actually, reset display, turn off light. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. Let's see if it works today. It's gonna be nice. Nope, it's not gonna be nice today. We're gonna start from the bottom, or start from the top and work our way down. See if there are any cracks and blemishes. Right there. Turn down my G pen. I find it's easier to color with the G pen for some reason. Don't know why. I'm probably going to change the texture on Az's gloves. Instead of making them like a perfect cotton gray, like I'm doing for the cloak, except for right here. I'm going to probably be doing a more satiny or leathery gray, like I'm going to be doing for the collar. Sorry, making sure I didn't miss any spots because that looked empty. I'm actually going to darken up the paper background so it's a little bit easier to see the colors that I missed. If it's not obvious right now, a little piece of troll lore that I didn't actually drop is trolls are nocturnal as well because they live in caves, so there's no reason for them to be up during sunlight. And Fern does comment on this very first chapter. So another reason why the goblins fear Az is because Az very much looks uncanny to the goblins. They know something is wrong. They may not be intelligent creatures by any means, but they are very much realize that Az is not correct. If Az was just a big goblin, that'd be one thing. But Az's troll features do make it so that it is very hard for them to integrate with goblin society. And Az's goblin almost everything makes it very hard for them to exist in troll society. At least, not without some bumps and bruises along the way. I think that does it. Look at our little bean. Look at our little bean. It is still not tracking me. Oh, lovely. What is going on with my VTuber model today? Did I knock my camera out of place? Nope, my camera's still in place. I have no idea why it's not tracking me right now. We can do some shading. I'm actually just going to do a multiply later for this. And do a dark teal. Why? Because I love multiply layers with dark teal. Teal is as is color. I tried to limit each character to one base color. As is teal and, well, two base colors actually. As is teal, teal and gray. Fern is orange brown, obviously. The rest of the characters that will show up occasionally. Their colors are yellow and blue. Yellow and blue. White and green. White and green, and there is one I'm missing off the top of my head. Oh yes, brown and green. I remembered after a second. I have no idea what's going on with my selection tool right now. I love the idea that goblins can just have bat-like hearing. Like, obviously trolls would too, because they live in such low-light scenarios, situations. They live in caves for the most part. But something about the thought that goblins specifically have very good hearing to combat their low intelligence. These poor creatures rolled very low on their intelligence scores. I cannot stress that enough. I cannot stress enough how low these poor creatures actually rolled on their intelligence. I had to make some creatures dumb. More specifically, I had to make it so that some creatures were less intelligent than others. Fortunately, goblins ended up pulling the short end of the stick. Originally, they were going to be more intelligent, like Az, but I realized very early on I didn't like the idea of it, and goblins that kind of Darwin themselves into evolution into trolls was a very fun concept that I just sort of ran with. Why did the Fae evolve into goblins? Well, the true matter of is they got bored. They wanted to do something else. They didn't want to be super powerful Fae anymore. I won't actually get to talk about the Fae much. The Fae will definitely be more of a thing in stories like Blood Fae, because, you know, fairy. That's what's wrong with it right now. Go. Da 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 da. Normal. Had to glow. Five, 10. I want to point out, as his eyes kind of glow, sort of. Like I mentioned before, the little rings that look like irises inside of Az's eyes are actually looking stones. What they're used for will get explored in Fracture Point, so I'm not going to say why. But I'm sure in the middle of the night, walking into a dark room with the... It's one of the troll aspects of Az's design. But the troll or with Az would be very intimidating, especially if you couldn't see them, but you know they can see you because their eyes are very adaptive to low light. I can imagine it would be very intimidating. save. Okay, things are starting to get really scuffy. And I'm starting to get burned out. I don't need to save that. We're gonna get rid of that. Should I probably continue to make the image of this little gremlin? Yes, I probably should. Am I, though? No. I'm probably going to continue this off stream. I will post the finished image on my Blue Sky, though. Make sure to join me there. Oh, my face tracking just randomly kicked back on. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, face tracking. That doesn't, you know, make me want to kick myself in the pants at all. Anyways, I'm looking and I'm seeing 2 viewers. Okay, we can raid out. Let's raid. Let's see it. Any of the peoples that I know. We have Plotter doing Hades 2. T doing Elder Scrolls. Soggy E doing Digimon. Forest Root doing Terraria. Who do we want to see? Who would they like to raid out to? I know I'm ending stream a little bit early, but it is hot as heck in here. I think I forgot to mention that. Oh, my face tracking went off again. Thank you, face tracking. We love you. Oh, it's back on again. Yay! I love that it keeps popping on and off. It's great. We love it here. I'm hot, tired, and sweaty. So, I'm going to raid out. And I think I am going to roll a d4. I am not going to explain the d4. Landed on 4. Who is streamer number 4? It is Forest Uru. So we are going to raid out to watch Terraria. It's been a while since I've seen Forest Uru, so that makes me very happy. Okay. Alright, my wonderful creatures of the multiverse. Go give my love to Forest. And I will see you later because I am tired and my hand is starting to cramp and it is very hot in this room right now. Alrighty. Take care of yourself, my guys. Night night.